Hello and welcome to part 1 of the C# tutorial series that we are recording in order to learn the programming language called C#. This first part is basically an introduction to the .NET framework and Visual Studio. This is to make you understand that when we use the word .NET framework, what it actually means, or when we say Visual Studio, what it actually means. So this tutorial, this part 1, is focusing on the .NET framework and Visual Studio. All the videos are brought to you by Minefield Software Solutions Private Limited, which is an ISO certified company. You can join us on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/minefieldsoft, and you can also visit our specially launched site for educational purpose, which is our onlinetutor.com. so you'll get all the videos, code samples and text articles on this website in a very systematic order, so that you can just scroll through the menu and go through all the videos and articles. The presenter for this video and for the other videos that we'll be recording will be myself, and my name is Ravinder Singh. Okay, now let's start with the first part for understanding C# programming language. Alright, now let's start with understanding about the C# programming language, the .NET framework and Visual Studio. Now before we start, let's make one thing very clear, that we are not expecting some very fresher into programming to understand these videos, because to understand what we are talking here, you have to have some programming experience already. So maybe with languages like C, C++ or Java or some other languages. So we are expecting that people who will be watching these videos, they actually already have some programming experience, right? So if I ask you that what do you expect from your programming environment or the programming technology, so if you have to choose which technology to use for programming, so what do you expect from the technology? Now very easily you would say that the first thing you expect is that it should give you a good help, a lot of help for writing the programs. So it should have a lot of pre-written code with it, like let's say it would be great to have a graphics library from where you can easily select a circle class, and you can make circles, you can make ellipses, you can make rectangles, lines, colorful shades and all those things. So the programming environment, if it can provide you with a lot of pre-written functionality, so that it becomes very simple for you to write your programs, so you only focus on your logic, you don't have to focus on the writing the whole basic functionality. So it would be great if the program can give you, if the technology can give you a lot of pre-written code. In answer to this, the .NET framework gives you two things. It has a base class library. So it has a base class library. Now by base class library we mean that it has the basic functionality that is used throughout the .NET technology. Right, so they give you some base class library which is pre-written, and a lot of managed libraries. So a lot of code in the form of classes, which is given to you by Microsoft and also by other people who keep contributing in this field. So when you start working with when you start programming with .NET technologies, you get a lot of pre-written code, so that you can at a very high speed just focus on writing your own programs, instead of actually sitting down and writing the basic functionalities like data structures and graphics and other things. So you have mathematics library, you have data structures, you have all kind of graphic things already written in .NET technology. The second thing you would say is that it would be great if the programming technology that I'm using can also help me in executing my programs. So it should help me in writing my programs, it should also help me in executing my programs. Now by executing my programs, I would mean that, let's say you are using C++ as your programming language, and once you are running your program, so it's basically your responsibility to see that all your objects, when they come into memory and when your program ends, they are also cleaned up from the memory, so there are no memory leaks and other things. So that is just one part of worrying about the runtime environment. The other part would be, like, you would expect that when I write code, it should run on different platforms. So maybe if I write code for desktop, some part of that code, if I want to run on a mobile device, so it should be able to run on a mobile device also, so that I should not have to rewrite the whole functionality again. So execution of the programs, if the technology can help me with, that would be great for me. So in answer to this, the .NET framework gives you something called a CLR, which is a common language runtime. So it's the responsibility of the CLR to actually see to it that your programs it's actually the responsibility of the CLR to see to it that the memory requirements for your programs are fulfilled and the garbage collection is done. And if you want to target different different platforms, you can do that easily. So that's the responsibility of the CLR. So now if we have to give a definition of what a .NET framework is, so we would say that .NET framework is basically a combination of the coding environment, right, and the runtime environment. So it's basically a combination of the pre-written functionality that you get and the common language runtime that helps you in executing your program. So this is what is called a .NET framework. So this is what is called a .NET framework. So when you start using .NET, you have lots and lots of help for writing your code, and you have lots and lots of help when you are executing your code, right? Now the third point is that you would expect your programming technology to help you during the code writing process. So you would expect to get a very powerful IDE, right, where you can write your code and you can debug your code. Now in answer to this, what .NET gives you is, or what Microsoft gives you is, something called Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is an extremely powerful IDE where you can write your programs, debug your programs, you can play around with your program, you can find out the errors, you can find out the logical errors, each and everything. So it's a very powerful IDE which you get from Microsoft in addition to the .NET framework to make your complete software writing experience a very good experience, right? So this is what is a .NET framework, and this is the IDE that we use when we are writing software that target the .NET framework. Another question is that what does the .NET technology give you? What is it actually that you get from the .NET technology? So the first question we would deal with is that, or the first reply we would deal with is that the .NET technology gives you a choice of the platform for which you can write software, right? So by this we mean that you can choose to write programs for window. So you can write programs which are window based, right? Basically means the desktop applications which will be installed on the client machines and they'll execute. Or you can use .NET to write softwares that run on the web. So you can write software which are web based. Basically this means that the software you write will be running in the web browser. Or you have a choice to write mobile based applications, so applications which will run on mobile phones or some other smart devices. So the .NET technology, it gives you a choice of platforms. You want to write window based desktop applications, or you want to write web applications, or you want to write mobile applications. Now .NET technology, it also gives you a choice of different programming languages. Like when you start programming with Java, the only programming language that you have in which you can write your software is actually Java. So we don't have any choice of programming languages on that side. So .NET gives you a choice of programming languages. So if you are from, let's say, C++ background, you can go with a programming language C#, whose syntax is actually very similar to the C and C++ syntax. Or if you are from a VB background, so you can go with a VB.NET. You can go with VB.NET, and you can write all your software using this programming language. In addition to this, you have a lot of other programming languages from which you can choose from, and they all can be used for writing software which target the .NET framework. So these are two programming languages which are provided by default when you start or when you install Visual Studio, or when you start programming with .NET framework. Now the third thing is that .NET technologies, they give you a choice to have different combinations. Now by this what we mean is that you may say that I want to write a window based application. So I want to write a window based application, but I want to use VB.NET as my programming language, right? Or you may say that I want to write a web application, a web based application, but I want to use VB.NET as my programming language, right? Or you may say that I want to write a window based application, but I want to use C# as my programming language, right? The same as with I want to write a mobile application, a mobile based application, and my language will be VB.NET, or mobile based application and my language will be C#. So .NET technology, it gives you the power to choose from what platform you want to write your software for. Is it a desktop, web, or mobile? Or and you can choose your own programming language. And it's not only about C# and VB.NET. You have a choice from many other programming languages that are actually supported by the .NET framework, right? So when you use .NET technologies, it helps you in coding, it helps you in execution, it helps you in writing your code, where Visual Studio comes into picture, and it gives you a choice to choose from different target platforms, window based, web based, mobile, or different programming languages. So the overall experience actually becomes very simple. The last thing that we are focusing on is that what are the different .NET framework versions, and what were the corresponding Visual Studios which were given to us by Microsoft to write programs for those .NET frameworks. Now we'll be writing three things. Number one, the .NET framework versions, the CLR versions, and the Visual Studio versions. So we'll be discussing three things: the .NET framework versions, and by .NET framework we mean that the whole coding environment, the CLR versions, which is the runtime environment, and the corresponding Visual Studio versions. So Microsoft, it actually started with .NET framework version 1.1, in which they launched the CLR version 1.1, and the Visual Studio that you got for writing programs that would target this framework was Studio 2003, right? Then after 1.1 came the .NET framework version 2.0, and with this new framework Microsoft came out with a new runtime environment which was CLR 2.0, and they also came out with a new Visual Studio version which was 2005. So if you wanted to write programs, or if you wanted to write software that would target .NET framework 2.0, you had to use Visual Studio 2005 for that. Then came Framework 3.0, in which Microsoft actually gave you some new technologies like WPF, WCF, WWF, the Workflow Foundation. So the .NET Framework 3.0, and with this the CLR version was still kept the same, which was 2.0. The CLR version was not changed, although new additions were made so that it could execute the programs for WCF, WPF, but the CLR version was still 2.0, right? And the Visual Studio was still 2005, so you could still write WPF programs or WCF programs in Visual Studio 2005. Then came the framework version 3.5, right? But the CLR version was still kept at 2.0. Additions were made to support programs that were written using the new libraries that were shipped with 3.5, but the CLR version was still 2.0. And at this time Microsoft came out with a new Visual Studio, which was 2008. So if you wanted to write programs that would be targeting framework 3.5, you needed Visual Studio 2008 for that. After 3.5 came framework version 4.0, and the CLR version at this time was changed to 4.0, and the studio that they launched with 4.0 was Visual Studio 2010. Right, so this small chart gives you a relation between the .NET Framework versions and the Visual Studio versions which were launched, so that you could write software to target that particular .NET Framework version. Right, now the last thing that we need to understand is that when you decide to start programming using .NET Framework, you don't have to start with you should not be very crazy about starting with the latest framework, because all these frameworks, they are actually written in an incremental fashion. So moving from 2.0 to 3.0, 3.0 would contain things which were already present in 2.0 plus new functionality that was written. So moving from 3.0 to 3.5, so the framework 3.5 would contain functionality which was already present in 3.0 plus some new functionality was written. And for 4.0, from 3.5 to 4.0, it would contain new functionality plus the one that was already written in 3.5, right? So you need to understand from where this whole thing started from and where it is today, right? So I hope this first part in C# tutorial series would have made the idea of what a .NET framework is and what Visual Studio is clear in your head, right? And also that using .NET framework you can use different languages, and you can write software for different platforms like window based, web based, or mobile based, and also the different versions of .NET and their corresponding Visual Studio versions. In the next part we'll discuss about the difference between C# and Visual C#. So what's basically the difference between when I say C# and when I say Visual C#. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video.